Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Albert Johnson. I'm with the Raptor Technologies Client Services team. And, I want to thank Mandy and Jamie for this opportunity, for letting Raptor come and kind of do this training for you guys today. So starting off, I want to give a little background on like, hey, what is Raptor? What is it? So we're a web-based application. We're the leading provider in integrated safety solution for schools. So a lot of clients that use our services use it primarily for visitor management and volunteer management as well. So I'm actually going to show you guys in today's training how the actual system works at the school level so you guys could start signing in visitors and volunteers into the Raptor system. So I think you guys all have a packet. So all of that information we're going to cover today, so you could definitely use it as a reference. I'm not going to go by that at all, but we're going to cover all that information here. So the first thing we're going to do is talk about the visitor module first, because that's really our baseline module that is our foundation for all of the modules in the Raptor system. So here, I'm going to actually pull up the Raptor system now. Okay, so I mentioned that the Raptor system is a web-based application. What does that really mean? That means that you guys, once you guys have access to Raptor, it's like Facebook. You can log in, look who's the activity, what visitors are in your building, things like that. But at the school level, once you actually need to sign in a visitor or sign in a volunteer to actually print the sticker and actually use the equipment, then the software needs to be installed on your actual computer stations, which their team is actually doing currently soon. And eventually you'll have the equipment installed on your computer station. So I'm really going to focus on the end user training of this. And once the software is installed on your computer stations, I'm kind of showing the perspective of like your end user, the front office staff member. And what they would do is once it's installed, you'll have this nice R logo here that lets you log into the Raptor system here. So what I'm going to do, full screen here, is log into the Raptor system. And the first thing you'd see, I'm actually logged in under what I call the district administrator. So that's kind of like Mandy and Jamie when they actually log into Raptor, a full overview of your Raptor system. I'm in my test client account. This is not the Greeley schools here. So just for this training, this is the school district called Raptor ISD. And you could have a little school, elementary, high school, and an admin office. But you could see here a dashboard representation. So once you guys start using the system, your district administrators have full visibility of which visitors, which volunteers are in your system. So at the top, you'll notice that you have all the volunteer applications that have been submitted that need to be reviewed by Jamie's team, and all the volunteers that actually signed in by you all at the campuses. But here, if I scroll down, you actually see visitor activity. So once you guys start using the system to sign visitors in and out, you'll have a quick dashboard as well. So here, what I'm going to focus on is actually the sign in and sign out screen. Okay? So when you guys log into the Raptor system, this is the page where you're going to actually be spending majority of your time using Raptor. Hope I'm not blocking anybody. And as you can see here, it's pretty simple and pretty intuitive. That if you look on the page, you could see that whatever function or mode that you're in is highlighted in orange. So we're in the sign-in mode, selected visitor. So we're going to talk about the visitor module first. So there's three main ways you could sign in a visitor into the Raptor system. So since you guys are a brand new client, guess what? You're going to have to scan everybody for the very first time. All right? But the good thing is that you only have to scan your visitors one time because Raptor will remember that visitor record. So if that parent or visitor comes back, you could do what we call a quick find. Okay? So what I'm going to do is discuss the scanning of the ID. So here is our license scanner. If anybody could see it, I'm kind of holding it up. Looks like a toaster. We call it the toaster scanner. I'm going to call it the toaster scanner, okay? So intuitively, that's how you scan the license. Like, you just take your visitor's driver's license or ID, just drop it in, like so. Then it's good to go. And then from here at the end user portal here, all you have to do is click Scan ID. And once you click Scan ID, it's going to pull it through and shred it. I'm just kidding. No, it's not. But it's going to pull it through, and then it's going to read the data from the ID. It's going to grab a picture from the license or ID. Then it's also going to read what we call the 2D barcode on the back of the driver's license or ID. So there's like a unique identifier on the back of IDs, getting really technical here. But we read that, it's like a barcode, and it outputs all of the information you can see here. So you can see this handsome fellow here, Albert Johnson, visitors coming into your building. So if I was the end user, I'd be like, hey, Mr. Johnson, what's your purpose of visit? Why are you here? So at this point of time, you would look under the destination field, and let's say it's lunchtime, obviously. So let's say I'm going to the cafeteria. So you could see under the destination field, these fields are populated. They're also customizable, okay? So if you guys want to add, like gym or any destinations in your school that need to be added to that, you could customize that. But here I could select cafeteria. And then you could also put notes. Any special notes for just more accountability on your visitor reports, you could actually put that as well. But from here, we're ready to submit this visitor into your building. So you have two options. You could click Submit and Print or Submit. Both options submit a visitor into your building electronically. With the exception of Submit and Print, we'll actually print the visitor sticker here. So I'm actually going to click Submit and Print to check Albert into the building. And then what you're going to see is that once you submit a visitor into your building, it's going to submit that person electronically, and then the badge will print out from here. See? Too easy, right? So what's important here from a safety and security aspect, that's kind of our main theme in our training, upon submission is when we do an actual what we call a live sex offender screening. Because that's our main goal here at Raptor is safety and security, so that we're screening your visitors and parents or whoever's coming into your building on a daily basis. So here at Raptor, what we do is that we actually have access to all 50 state sex offender registries, okay? But you imagine each state sex offender registry updates their database at different times. So here at Raptor, we, on a weekly basis, we get the most up-to-date changes. There's new sex offenders, they get enrolled. There's people who actually expire and get dropped off the offender list. So it's a good practice that when you're using Raptor, when you're submitting visitors into your building, you don't know what their status may be. They could change. Albert Johnson's a great person today, but 2 months later, if he's a registered sex offender and he comes back into your building and you submit him, it's going to pop up that possible offender alert. So you really want to submit every visitor into your building. But one of the misconceptions of a lot of our clients is that the scanning of the ID actually causes the sex offender screening. That's not true, okay? It's upon submission. And what I mean by that is that as you guys start scanning visitors in and out of your building, you're going to have the returning visitors, right? You always have that dad or that mom that comes every day, every week, for whatever reason, and you don't have to scan them over again. It's a good practice to get their ID and driver's license to kind of verify their identity, right? But the second way you could submit a visitor into your building is called a quick find. So once you're able to find somebody, let me use my boss here. Let's say Suzanne comes in and she's been scanned before. Suzanne, have you been scanned before? Well, you could do a quick find. Type in first name or last name or full name, and the visitor record shows up here. And I could say, hey, Suzanne, what are you coming? What are you here for? And let's say she's going to the classroom, and you could click Submit and Print. And upon submission, we do that live sex offender screening. So you could see here, it was good, and the visitor sticker gets printed out as well. Okay, so but what happens though, right? As you're doing this, everything's all good, right? Then you get that one individual, let's say John Doe comes in. He's a returning visitor, he's been scanned before, and there's a book fair today here at Johnson Elementary, okay, so that he wants to go to, okay? And I was like, okay, Mr. Doe, you've been here before. What's your purpose of visit? Book fair? Okay, let me select library. And I'm like, CYA, so book fair here. Okay, and then we'll submit this person into the building. So I'm going to click Submit and Print. And again, what happens here, what we're specifically doing on that live sex offender screening is we're taking first name, last name, and date of birth. Okay, so key 3 fields. So anytime you're using Raptor, anytime you're submitting a visitor to your building, if you could do a quality check when you scan a first-time visitor, make sure that the first name, last name, and date of birth is accurate when it outputs to Raptor, right? Because, as you can see here, first name, last name, date of birth of John Doe, this is a possible offender alert. So if you see this for the first time, just remain calm, okay? Because it doesn't mean sex offender, okay? No, that doesn't mean that way, because what happens, since we search first name, last name, and date of birth, there's people with common names, John Smith, David Smith, Jose Garcia, and there's somebody out there with a similar date of birth, and probably somebody that's a registered sex offender as well. So you get a lot of false positives. So you're going to say, oh, not a match. So what you got to do as the end user is compare, hey, does your visitor on the left, that's shown here, or the person that's John Doe standing right in front of you, is a match to this person on the right, okay? There's 2 things you want to look for, pictures, right? So pop quiz. Does the picture on the left look like the picture on the right? No, right? We all agree it's a no match? Okay, so we click no match here. But what happens? Okay, the pictures, I don't know. It looks kind of weird. I'm not too sure. Well, we give you some additional information. So if you have the driver's license or ID right in front of you, notice that we have physical description. You could compare height, weight, things like that. Middle name, okay? It's a unique identifier as well to see if it's a possible match or not. We even take it a step level even more. If you want to actually do more research on the actual offender, we actually provide you a link to the state that person's actually registered at. So you could see this guy named Willie T. Kidd is actually registered in the state of Arizona. So if you click this link down here, it's actually going to bring you to the Arizona State Sex Offender Registry. So you and your administrator security personnel could search that database and get more information. And sometimes different sex offender state databases give you updated pictures, photos, physical descriptions, things like that. So you guys can make that decision. But you'll notice, like, hey, so why is John Doe matching to Willie T. Kidd? Is because we also do alias matches. So Willie T. Kidd was a John Doe at one point in time. So when you registered as a sex offender, it's triggering an alias match. So here, this is not a match. Okay, what happens if it is a match? Okay, if it is a match, still remain calm. And this is why we're doing this training, so that you guys can have your, what we call a visitor response policy in this, that as a best practice, you want to still act professional because there could be other people, other visitors or parents in the room as well during this. And at this point in time, this is where you would click match. And Raptor says, are you sure it's a match? Okay? And the moment you confirm, yes, it's a match, that's when email, text message notifications get sent out to all of your administrators and security personnel that's assigned to receive those alerts. So district administrators like Jamie and Mandy, they're getting alerted at the district level. And then we created the context like your principal, assistant principal, to receive these alerts as well. So the moment you hit that, yes, it's a match, that's when the alerts go out, okay? When you confirm. False positive, so it's not a match, no alerts go out. But if you ever forget, we've been in business for so long, we've heard all the horror stories, okay? And because we got the parents that were on the recipient end of how this was mishandled. We heard a story where the end user told John Doe, hey, is this you? Or, hey, are you a sex offender? Those are the things you do not want to do. Okay? Because it's not a very good experience. But believe in it, speaking the truth, these are the stories we hear. And what we do at Raptor is that you as a client have a district policy here. If you ever forget what the procedures are, you could click here, and then you could have your cheat sheet. This is just a sample. This doesn't apply to you all. But you want to remain calm. Let the visitor know, tell them to have a seat. If that visitor wants to leave, let them leave. But let them, hey, having a little technical error with the system, one of my administrators is going to come here and help troubleshoot this so we could try to sign you into the building. Do you mind having a seat? Something along those lines, so you're not, putting them on blast, right? So here, that's a little cheat sheet for the district policy here, but I'm going to click, yes, it is a match. And then you'll notice at the bottom right corner, Raptor talks back to you, alert notifications go out. So right now, all the district level administrators are getting notified, and all your principal, your assistant principal are getting those email and text messages. I'm a principal, apparently, because I got a text message just now, and an email as well with the offender alert. And the last question is what I call the gatekeeper question. As much as Raptor is a tool for safety and security, you guys are the ultimate gatekeepers at your schools of who gets let into your building. So reality is there's our parents out there that are registered sex offenders, and they have kids that attend public schools. And legally, they're allowed to access their kids. But the moment they visit your schools, you guys dictate the terms. Whether or not that person gets approved to come in, it's really up to you all. But what we see as a best practice for a lot of clients is that if the visit is approved, maybe that sex offender who's a parent, is chaperoned by a security personnel or an administrator at all times, or having limited access to your campus. Okay, so kind of keeping that in mind if you guys do run into this alert. And you could see this is where you deny access. If you want to let that person into the building, maybe you click yes, and a visitor sticker gets printed out. Or click no. Let's say it's some random guy going to the book fair that has no kids attending my school. I'm going to click no, because it's common sense. You have no business being in my school. I'm not going to let you in my building. And you'll notice if I click sign out here, showing you the sign out page, these are all the people that are signed in your building. And you'll notice that John Doe is not checked in. So since we're here, the sign out screen here, you could see who's in your building at any times. If you take your mouse and hover over the photo, you could see a zoomed in. So when you're signing out visitors, we recommend to have your parents or visitors tear their sticker, hand it back to you, so at least you have a physical reminder to sign that person out. But if they're waving by, you're signing them out, you could just quickly sign out, let's say Albert Johnson here, and sign out. You could also edit the reasons as well. So let's say Suzanne went to the classroom, now she wants to go have lunch. You could actually click this little pencil icon, which is edit, and you can actually change that to classroom to, cafeteria. Hit the little check mark, it updates the date and time. If you like, you can actually reprint the visitor sticker, and it'll actually have the new destination and time as well. So that's the kind of the sign-in out page here. So you can see it's pretty simple. But going back to the sign-in screen, I covered two main ways so far to check a visitor into your building. But the second thing we do every time a visitor gets checked into your building is that we do what we call a custom alert screening as well. So you as a client have something called a custom alert database. And that's where you guys could create any special alerts for any parents, visitors, whatever reason. A lot of our clients use that for your banned visitors, your non-custodial parents, your restraining orders, those special alerts that you as a school need to be aware of. You could create those alerts in Raptor, both at the district level or at the campus level. And for example, so if a parent comes in, let's say it's Edmund Meeson here, I could do a quick find, and you'll notice Edmund's visitor record shows up. Let's say it's lunchtime, and he wants to eat lunch with his son Sam. And I'm going to put a little note here, click submit and print, and you'll notice the possible custom alert. So every time a visitor gets screened, we're also screening against the custom alert database. And you could see it's kind of like the same concept with the sex offender alert, but here as an end user, you would have to read these specific notes of the alert text that says Edmund is not allowed to have contact with Sam per the court order that's on file, okay? And one of the cool things with custom alerts is that this is totally optional, but if you had that custom alert, meaning that document, that court order in PDF, instead of digging in the red folder, if you're able to upload that when you create the custom alert, you could have that available for your end user. So you could see, if I was an end user, I could say, hey, Edmund, there's a court order here that says you're not allowed to have contact with Sam. I can't let you in the building. So I would go back into Raptor here, and then click on match. Are you sure it's a match? Yes, it is. And then, do you still want to sign this person to the building? The gatekeeper question. Probably not, because the court order says he's not allowed to have access with Sam. So here, the denial is successful. Edmund Meeson did get checked into the building. So the third way and final way, you could actually, I got another alert just now, but the third way you could submit a visitor into your building is called a manual entry, okay? So that is for those situations where your visitor may not have a scannable ID or driver's license. They have an alternate form of ID, like a passport or a birth certificate. And if they have a passport, you could click on manual entry here. Obviously, we can't scan a passport. It doesn't fit into Toaster, right? So you'd have to manually type in first name, last name, and date of birth. Those are the key fields you need, and that's why those are required fields in red here. So if Albert Johnson, let's say he has a passport here, you could actually type in the passport information, the ID type. You could actually select passport or the other options, whatever that passport number is, and then check that person into the building. Let's say he's going to the classroom, and you would click submit and print and submit. And just because you manually typed in the information, it's still going to do that live sex offender screening, okay? Just because you didn't scan the ID. So when you're doing a manual entry, you want to make sure you accurately type in the date of birth and spell first name and last name correctly as well. And when you hit submit and print, it's going to actually submit that visitor into your building. So along with that, the manual entry is a one-time entry, meaning it's something we call an unofficial visitor record. So it's not a reusable record as opposed to if you scan a first-time visitor with a driver's license or ID. So they're not what we call quick find eligible, okay? So, but you as a client have the option, I looked at it, it's enabled in your account, is that if you do have that person with that passport that you just typed in, and if your policy says, hey, passports and birth certificates, we could create them as an official record, you as a client could actually click this official record box here. And what that does is that it will make that person official, so the next time he comes back, you don't have to enter that password all over again every single time. So again, you want to use this on a case-by-case basis because you don't want to use this on like unofficial documents, like someone's Costco card or someone's Sam's card or a credit card with their face on it. You don't want to use that as a unique identifier because it doesn't show maybe full legal name, and definitely doesn't show date of birth. And if I'm John Doe trying to get into your building, keep that in mind. So that's what the manual entry here is in Raptor, and those are the three main ways you could submit a visitor into your building. And one of the cool things in Raptor is that once you guys start building your visitor database, your visitor records are shared across all buildings. So you're getting a lot of parents that have kids that attend multiple schools. So once you scan your visitor once at one school, the next time, let's say I have another daughter at the middle school, and you as an end user could say, hey, have you ever been scanned at any of our schools in our district? And then you could do a quick find. So if Albert Johnson comes here to the middle school for the very, very first time, you could see that visitor record is shared as well. So when you guys are all what we call going live using the system, you guys kind of building your visitor database right away and start asking questions. Hey, have you been scanned at any of our buildings before? So that's the visitor module and user training here of the Raptor system. I want to go over the other features of the visitor module before we go into volunteers. So you as an end user also have two unique features that you could do. So here on the left navigation panel, if you click modules and visitors, okay, and I'm going to go to the elementary school here, you could actually see your visitor database of who the visitors who have been scanned and have been entered in the past. But you could also have these two other options here. One is called delayed entry. And this is a case scenario where you had a visitor come into your building, but your Raptor system wasn't available for whatever reason. Let's say the electricity went out at your school, and then you had to go old school for a moment and get someone manually and write their name down and date of birth. You can actually check that person back into the Raptor system in the past. So if the power went out around 7 a.m., if Nelson Lins, let's say you use Nelson, he's been scanned before, you could actually check him into the building for today's date, at whatever time he came in as well. And if he left as your building, you could actually put a sign-out time. But if he's still in your building, you could actually submit him in. Let's say he's doing something in the main office. You could click submit. Again, we're doing that live sex offender screening, that custom alert database screening as well. Is the question? No, that's a great question. So if everything matches up perfectly, so I just scanned my ID, and I've been scanned before in my school district here. It's apples for apples. If first name, last name, date of birth all match, it won't create a duplicate. It'll just say, oh, that's the same record, and it looks at that same record as well. All right, so that's the delayed entry you could definitely use. But another thing you could use in the visitor module is for big, large visitor parent events that you have at your school. So one of the things that a lot of our clients do is that they send out messages to their schools that if there's a big event like Grandparents' Day or Back to School Day or End of the Year Party or Valentine's Day, you guys could send those messages to those parents and let them know, hey, if you want to RSVP to this event, send us an email or let us know so we could add you to what we call the batch printing event. And this is where you guys could create an event in the future. Let's say I'm going to use Grandparents' Day as an example, and I'm actually going to change the date here for a moment to make sure that this is in the future. Let's say it's August 3rd. And once this event is created, you have the ability to add visitors who have been scanned before to this event. So if you have like 50 people that you know are going to attend this event and they've been scanned before, then you could add them individually to this event here. So you could see all of the visitors that have been added already in the past that have been scanned. And then what this allows you to do is that if I hit print batch now, it's actually going to run that live sex offender screening, that custom alert database screening for all of those visitors that RSVP to this event, and actually print their visitor stickers as well. So typically on that day, when the Grandparents' Day does occur, somebody from your team could handing out badges, verifying identities, say, oh, here's Nelson Lins, here's Albert Johnson, and then you guys could come into the building, and you know that they've actually been screened against the sex offender database. So another tool to use, which is called batch printing. All right, so here, finally, what I want to cover here is the reports. So as you imagine, our system's web-based, and it's a paperless solution, right? So no more visitor notebooks, reading people's messy handwriting, things like that. Every time you check a visitor into your building, we're building progressively over time your visitor reports. So anytime you need to reference that report for whatever reason, you guys have access to that. So on the reports here, you could see the reports with a description of that, but I could click on visitor details, just for this example, and do today's date, and click generate a report, and you can see all the visitors that have been checked into your building. And one of the cool things about our reports, it's very dynamic in terms of the data that you like. So what I mean by that is that first, you could actually customize the date range. So I did today's date, but if I go back, let's say, beginning of the week and generate this report, you actually see all of that data and actually increase the items per page. But what you do here is that you actually could click any column, okay, and then actually customize which data fields is important for you. For example, I want date of birth. I don't care about the ID number. I don't care about building name, because I know this is from my school, and have that report just like this. You could also take any of the columns and sort it and drop it up here to kind of categorize that by destination or reason. So these are people that came into the cafeteria. These are people that came into the classroom. And you could also do some filtering. So if you want to know every time Albert Johnson goes into the building, you could maybe run a filter by last name and type in Johnson here, click filter, and then actually have Albert Johnson. And from here, you can imagine if you needed to send this report to an organization, an administrator, or whoever, you could export this report in Excel or PDF, and you could also save this report in the future. So if you're stalking Albert Johnson for some reason, you could actually save this report as the Albert Johnson report. And then from here, what basically happens on a custom report, it saves all that data column manipulation that you just did and the filtering, so you could just run that report really easily without having to do that. Okay, so that's the visitor module training here. Any questions so far before I go to the second half regarding volunteers? Okay, and what you're going to find out when the volunteer training, it's exactly the same concept, but I want to give you guys some insight of what is actually going on with the volunteer management system in Raptor. So you guys have at a high level overview of your school district's new process, and then I will tie it to how this is going to work for you all. Okay, so for the volunteer management system, I like to talk about into three phases. There's phase one of the volunteer application. How does an applicant apply to become a volunteer? Phase two is the processing, which is Jamie's team, who will process those applicants and run the background check to make sure that they're cleared and passed all the requirements. And phase three is the tracking, when they go to your campuses to sign in as a volunteer so you could track their volunteer hours in and out of your building. So what the goal is here, once your team is ready to go live with the volunteer application, is that you guys on your school district webpage, and I'm going to use another client that I was referencing around here, is one of our clients, here's Irving ISD. They use our volunteer management system, and you can imagine when applicants need to apply as a volunteer, they say, hey, go to our webpage, click on community, click on volunteer. You know, you guys have that same type of process as well on the volunteer landing page, where, did it change their page? No, they didn't. Okay, here you go, and then here's volunteer. And a lot of our clients have a landing page under a school district page that shows all the requirements to become a volunteer. And you notice that Irving ISD, I don't know if you guys can see this, it's kind of small here, but let me make it a little bit bigger. It says all volunteers are required to complete an application with Raptor and also mention any other volunteer requirements as well. But once the applicant clicks on English or Spanish, once they click English here and click accept, this is where the volunteer application pops up. And you're now looking at the Raptor system, okay? So this is kind of phase one. So this is what your volunteer applicants will need to do to become a volunteer at Greenlee Avenue School District. And here you can see that you guys could have a concept of a welcome page. Let me full screen this. And the applicant would go through each steps, 1 through 7 or 1 through 8, and type in and fill out all the information. So I'm not going to actually go through this in detail. I'm just really covering this at a high level. They're going to put their personal information here. They're going to sign up for their school, the campuses that they're going to volunteer at, and the functions that they're interested in volunteering, the chaperone, the classroom helper, things like that, and the organizations. And then once they submit the application in Raptor, from there, we actually start doing a live sex offender screening on that application, and two, we're going to actually process that through our integrated background check provider to run that background check. So every time an applicant gets submitted, we're actually going to run that full background check screening right away to help Jamie's team process those volunteer applications. So once applications are getting submitted here in Raptor, I'm going to show you Irving's queue here. All right, so here I'm going to pull up Irving ISD real quick. All right, and you can see all of their volunteer applications that have been submitted. There's 36 that have been submitted so far, and this is what, again, you guys won't have access to this. This is something that Jamie and her team is going to be doing, and on the approval queue is where all of those pending applications land. So you could see here is where all of those applications are getting processed, and once the background check comes back and it's completed, if they pass, if there's no criminal history, guess what? Raptor will automatically approve that volunteer, send an email notification to that volunteer that they are approved, and then you guys will have that at the campus level available to sign that person in as a volunteer. But if that person doesn't clear the background check, then that is handled on a case-by-case basis where Jamie and her team makes the final decision on whether or not that volunteer is approved, right? And so she either denies that application or approves them. And if someone gets denied, they don't get an email, congratulations, you've been denied. Okay, we don't do that. We don't send any communication. That's handled how you guys handle that today, okay? But once applications are approved and volunteers, you get to see that your volunteers will appear at your respective school. So when you log into Raptor, I showed you the other modules, I showed you visitors, but if you want a true list of all the volunteers who selected your campus, you would click on volunteers here, and it would have the big list of volunteers that selected your campus and are approved, okay? So how does this relate to you all? So in the Raptor screen here, going back to the sign in and sign out screen, now if I click sign in and select volunteer, now there is a clear difference now checking in a visitor than checking in a volunteer. Because as you mentioned, I just showed you the process of the application and background check, is that now when you sign in a volunteer, let's say Albert Johnson says he's a volunteer, you could do what we call a quick find. Because you'll notice it's not like the visitor module where you could just scan in a random person. So, hey, Lisa, you want to become a volunteer? It doesn't work that way. You can't just scan her as a volunteer. It's a quick find, which searches your district-wide approved volunteer database. So I'm just going to take a wild guess there's someone named Smith in Irving ISD. Okay, so Dorothy Smith here. Let's say she comes in. She's an approved volunteer. I'll go, okay, here's Dorothy Smith. And from here, you can see she has a complete volunteer record. And one of the cool things about the Raptor system is that as you guys start scanning your visitors and start building your visitor database, those visitors eventually will be interested in volunteering. And if they applied, entering their information exactly what appears on their ID, their visitor scan driver's license is going to pull up on their volunteer record as well. So here, Dorothy Smith has a complete volunteer record. So I could ask her what functions she applied for. You could see the list of functions that are shown here. Let's say she's doing a field trip chaperone, and then organizations that she's affiliated with, and then we would click Submit and Print. And once you click Submit and Print, guess what we do? The same exact thing we do with our visitors. Live sex offender screening and a custom alert database screening on that volunteer. But this time, a volunteer sticker would print out with that information here. I don't want to print because this is actually a live client, but it would actually print Dorothy's name, volunteer, not visitor, okay, and the function. So if it says chaperone or mentor, and that volunteer is alone with that child or student, then you know that person's approved as a volunteer and they're actually allowed, rather than a visitor is one-on-one with a student, and you're like, hey, that's not right, because why is that person mentoring or tutoring that person? That person should be a volunteer. Just as examples, as when you see people wearing that volunteer sticker, okay? But here, what you'll notice is that when you as a new client, not all of your volunteers are going to be scanned as visitors ahead of time. You're going to have volunteers, let's say April Smith here, who doesn't have a picture here, but she's an approved volunteer because I could find her. And if I click sign in, you'll notice here you have to prove their identity, right? Because what if John Doe says he's April Smith, okay? Like, hey, prove that you're April Smith. The only way they could prove that, right, if they give you their driver's license or ID, because you at the district level ran a background check based on that data, and that was approved. But if John Doe just tries to say that they're April Smith, then there's a problem, right? So you would take their ID, and then let's say April Smith, I have her ID, and I click Scan ID. If everything matches, first name, last name, and date of birth, it's going to overwrite that profile and update it with the scanned driver's license or ID. But if it doesn't match, because April Smith is actually Albert Johnson, which is not a match, it's going to flag you. Say, hey, this person's not who they say they are, and basically you don't want to let that person in as a volunteer, okay? But if it did match in a perfect scenario, you would have a perfect picture here like Dorothy Smith as well, okay? So here, what I'm trying to communicate is that when you sign in a volunteer, it's really based on a quick find. So if you're able to find that volunteer, you know 100% they're an approved volunteer. But if you do a quick find and let's say, hey, it's Lisa here, she's a volunteer here at Irving ISD. If I click find and type in her full name, I can't find her. So what does that mean? That means either one, they didn't apply at all. Two, they did apply, they're still pending as an application, right? Or three, they did all of that, but they got denied, okay? So you don't really know that. So what that scenario is. But you know that they're not an approved volunteer, so they would have to follow your guidelines of maybe touching base with Jamie and her team to see if that volunteer is approved or not. Okay, questions so far on that? Okay, so here, as you imagine, as you're signing volunteers in and out of your building, switching gears, let me go to my client account. It's exactly the same concept in terms of signing in and signing out. So I'm actually going to sign in a couple of volunteers here to kind of show you how this works. So let me do. So here, let's say Albert's a volunteer. Select them to career day. And do Alex. Or not. Let me do Anna. Okay, I'm going to check Anna into the building here for career day. And then you'll notice here under sign out for volunteers of all the volunteers that are signed in. So this is where all the hours starts to track. So you can actually track by whatever functions you sign them in for career day, field trip, chaperone. And then once you sign this volunteer in and out of the building, that is recordable in our volunteer report. So if I click on reports here and go to volunteers, you're going to see the same type of concept with the reports I showed you earlier, but we have a plethora for volunteers. So you can actually track by hours, your top volunteers are, things like that as well, okay? But here, what I want to cover is the actual volunteer portal, because once a volunteer becomes approved, they actually have access to what we call a volunteer portal. They actually could track their volunteer hours every time they sign into your respective campuses. So, and it's a free portal that they get communicated when they get an email. Is there a question? Great question. So for both visitors and the volunteer management system, there's an automatic sign-out time that is preset by your team already. So it's usually set outside your school business hours. So if a visitor comes in, they forget to sign out because they go out one of the back exit doors, we're going to sign them out at 6 p.m. It's a time that's outside your school business hours, so you know that if anybody got signed out at 6 p.m. or whatever the time is, that person forgot to sign out. And same thing with volunteers as well. So here, what I'm going to show you guys is the volunteer portal, and this is really switching gears if I'm showing the perspective of the approved volunteer who's been signing in at your campuses, volunteering in and out. And this is something they have access to as well, and where they could actually log in. So if I'm an approved volunteer at Raptor ISD, I could log into my volunteer portal. If I can remember my password, I think that's it. And you could actually see and keep track of your volunteer hours. So here is my volunteer profile with all of my information here, and all the functions that I've signed up for. But if I click on hours here, this is where you could actually see every time I've signed in at your respective schools, at your school district, the time in and time out, so it actually could track my hours. They could also add their hours as well, which is an honor system. It's really used for volunteer events that are outside your school business hours. during the weekend or in the evening. They can actually track their hours as well. But what's important here is the events concept. So you guys have the ability, let me remove myself from this event here, to create volunteer events at your schools. And you have the permission to create volunteers. So if I click on modules and click volunteers here, okay, you'll notice when you click this, the delayed entry, the batch printing for volunteers capabilities are the exact same concept for visitors. But here, there's a tab called events. And this is where you could create an event for your approved volunteers only. So if I click add event, this is where you could create Grandparents' Day or whatever that volunteer event is, that field trip, and put the description information, how many people are needed, and what function that dials down to. So whatever functions you guys have defined, let's say you're trying to recruit chaperones, you could make chaperones here available so that it will target those approved volunteers that actually originally selected chaperone when they got approved. Okay, so if I go back here and hit cancel, I'm going to show you my Grandparents' Day. It shows you at that future date and time of that event. And you'll notice here that it's targeting chaperones under function. And once that event is created, your approved volunteers have two ways of signing up for this event. They could either, one, log into the volunteer portal, which I showed you earlier, to actually sign up for that event. So if I actually log into my volunteer portal here, I could see that Grandparents' Day that was just advertised through an email recently, and actually could look at the details and see how many people are needed, where it's at. And if I want to sign up for that event, I could click sign up. And then once I've signed up for that event, you'll have that visibility at the campus level when you refresh your event of who actually signed up for that building. So you could see here, Albert was just added to this event. You could also add attendees to this event. If they call you over the phone or shoot you an email, hey, add me to that event. Well, you could actually click event sign up and do a quick find and add that person. So I don't have any other approved volunteers here. Let me see. But if someone calls you, you could do a quick find and add that volunteer. Let's say Anna wanted to become a volunteer for this event. You could add her here, and then you'll see that 3 people are in this event as well. Some of the other email communications that you guys can do when you create this event is that if you click email options, you could also click email all eligible. So what this means is that if you guys have 5,000 volunteers in the district, and let's say 1,000 of them actually selected chaperone, when you click email all eligible, it's going to email all 1,000 volunteers that selected chaperone. Okay? And once this event is near to completion, you could also click on email all signed up so that you could send them a friendly reminder, hey, it's going to rain tomorrow, bring an umbrella. Hey, it's going to be hot, bring some bottled water. And you can actually email all signed up, and it's going to email those 3 volunteers that signed up for this event. So, this is how the events are managed in the Raptor system. So you, as a campus, have the ability to kind of use this as well. And going back to the volunteer portal, those are the 2 main things the approved volunteer has access to. Okay, so I believe that is basically it for the volunteer management system.